In Ghost of Tsushima Legends, you take on the role of a ghost, a highly skilled warrior worthy of legend, but not all ghosts are the same. So I'm Darcblade, with a class guide to the Hunter in Ghost of Tsushima Legends. In this guide we'll be covering the basics of the Hunter, including its abilities, skills, playstyles and more. The Hunter is the ranged class specialist out of the 4 ghosts in the game. A skilled archer, they're able to take on foes from afar before their opponents can even get close. They can take out key victims silently and also provide long range support for when your allies are in combat. They are also the only class that can make use of the longbow, which enhances their ranged capabilities even further. The Hunter is one with the bow and great for any player who likes to take on a ranged DPS role. Now when it comes to Ghost of Tsushima Legends, every class has various class abilities, ultimates and more. These are unlocked at various ranks as you level up your character. When it comes to the Hunter, it has a choice between 2 class abilities. The first and default is Staggering Arrow. When you activate the ability, the Hunter will knock a special arrow against the bow, and when fired, it will cause a small area of effect explosion that will stun enemies. This is useful for taking on groups of opponents, or if you need to retreat. If an opponent is stunned, they won't fight back, so it allows you to deal some uninterrupted damage, or alternatively, you can use the Staggering Arrow to retreat if you get overwhelmed. Alternatively, the other class ability is the Explosive Arrow. Much like the Staggering Arrow, when you activate the ability, the Hunter will knock a special arrow, which when fired, will explode after a short delay, obviously causing damage, but also setting enemies alight. Whilst the Staggering Arrow is great for crowd control, the Explosive Arrow is your DPS choice out of the class abilities. Now on top of class abilities, every ghost has access to an ultimate. The Hunter's ultimate is the Eye of UCHITSUNE. To use this, you must have 3 resolve points. These are located down in the bottom left of your screen, via the small yellow pips. When activated, your Hunter's vision will turn red, and you'll automatically target 3 enemies, to which when you fire the bow when you're ready, it will guarantee headshots on those targets. Now there is a little bit of a charge mechanic to this in a way, as you can delay when you fire the bow to make sure that your shots hit. As I mentioned, this ultimate can hit up to 3 enemies, but this can be augmented to hit more via the perks. Nonetheless, this is a great crowd clearing ultimate, but unfortunately you don't get to pick which targets the ultimate homes in on. Now as well as having class abilities, ultimates, every ghost has access to various perks in the game. Each class has access to 9 perks, each divided into 3 categories. For the perk 1 slot, the Hunter has access to Executioner, Scent of Blood and Hunter Unleashed. Executioner is a perk that increases headshot damage by 50% when the target you're shooting at is within 12 meters. This vastly increases your damage, but it can be risky because when an opponent is that close, they're normally targeting you and about to strike. Nonetheless, this is a great damage increase if you're willing to take the risk to get close to opponents. The next perk is Scent of Blood, which increases the draw and reload speed of your bow by 100% for 30 seconds after attempting an assassination. So when you perform an assassination or critical strike, you'll have increased capabilities with the bow. And then finally for the perk 1 slot is Hunter Unleashed. This decreases the class ability cooldown by 15%. Another useful skill, especially for late game when you also get gear that will decrease your class ability cooldown even further. Now personally out of these perks I prefer Executioner, but they're all good in their own right and as always it's down to personal preference. When it comes to the perk 2 slots you have Resupply, Status Damage and Piercing Arrow. Resupply is a skill that refills 30% of all your ammunition types. But to do this you have to be aiming with the bow and press X. However, this will cost 1 resolve pip to use, but nonetheless this is great for sustained fights where you cannot quickly resupply. However, I normally find there are plenty of resupply points scattered around the various maps, so I don't find this one too useful. Next up is Status Damage. This is a perk that increases the damage of status effects by 25%. So by default, you'll always have access to fire arrows, for example. This basically will increase the damage of the fire effect by 25%. Should you also have access to poison arrows, this will also help in regards to that element as well. And then finally is Piercing Arrows. This unlocks piercing arrows for whatever bow you are using that can penetrate shields and more. However, you have to select piercing arrows manually by aiming with the bow and pressing circle. Out of these perks, I personally prefer Status Damage or Piercing Arrows, although when it comes to piercing arrows, some of the bows you have come with Shield Piercer or Helm Piercer, which gives that said bow the innate ability to actually pierce through enemies' defenses anyway, eliminating the need for piercing ammo, eliminating the need for piercing arrows. And then finally are the perk free slots, which include Pinpoint, All-Seeing Eye, and Legendary. Pinpoint is a perk that gives a 50% chance that body shots will deal the same amount of damage as headshots. This is a useful skill for players who are not that confident with the bow, who don't quite have the aim yet to guarantee headshots. The next perk is All-Seeing Eye, which allows the Eye of UCHITSUNE, so your ultimate ability, to target 2 more opponents, so it can hit up to 5 enemies, making the crowd clearing capabilities of this ultimate even greater. And then finally is Legendary, which increases the number of legendary items you can equip by 1. This is a late game perk, and its usefulness is dictated by how many legendary items you have access to. So there we have it, those are all the perks for the Hunter. Now I would say none of these are must-have, so you can pretty much go with what you feel most comfortable with. For the perk 1 slot, I tend to always go with Executioner, for that increased headshot damage for when enemies are close. I then like to take Piercing Arrows for the perk 2 slot, and All-Seeing Eye for the perk 3 slot. But like I said, it's down to personal preference. Now when it comes to Ghost of Tsushima Legends, every hunter has access to various ghost weapons and charms. When it comes to the hunter, none of them are really mandatory per se, but I'd always recommend taking caltrops, which are small spikes that you throw on the ground. These will help keep enemies out of far and stun them should they step on them. So put this in choke points where you know enemies will be coming from, and they'll get staggered and stunned as they move across them, allowing you more time to shoot them with your arrows. The other ghost weapons aren't too vital. Your ranged ghost weapon I would say is down to personal preference, and when it comes to your charm I would always recommend taking a ranged charm or hunter charm to increase your ranged capabilities. But when it comes to the classes in Ghost of Tsushima Legends, everyone has pros and cons. When it comes to the hunter, its biggest pro is its ranged DPS. Able to take out enemies from afar quite quickly and easily, it's a strong DPS class. On top of that, it's also quite good at taking out enemies stealthily. As arrows are technically silent, you can take out opponents from afar so long as you're accurate with your headshots. And then finally, for the pros, the Eye of UCHITSUNE, the ultimate ability, is one of the best crowd clearing ultimates in the game, especially when coupled with the skipping stone bow. This legendary longbow will cause headshots to ricochet to nearby enemies, enhancing your ultimate's crowd clearing capabilities. But unfortunately every ghost has cons. When it comes to the hunter, one of its biggest cons is unfortunately when it's in close range combat, sword fighting and such, it's not the best when compared to the other classes in the game, so it struggles when it comes to melee. And the other con is unfortunately there's a chance at times you'll run out of arrows, which means that you'll have to resupply often. This can be alleviated slightly by the resupply perk, but nonetheless it's still a con for this class. So there we have it, that is the basics of the hunter. In my opinion, it's one of the best DPS classes in the game, especially if you're able to get your hands on the legendary Skipping Stone Bow. Although not the best when it comes to melee, this shouldn't be an issue as you should be able to take out enemies before they get in melee range with you. So long as you're comfortable with using the bow in Ghost of Tsushima, this is one of the strongest damage classes out there. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a class guide to the hunter in Ghost of Tsushima Legends. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.